Shaking things up. New poll data shows a shifting field after presidential candidates converge on Iowa.
One more bite.
Not private prayer. Pope Francis clarifies the truth about the Eucharist. Wounded souls. War veterans suffering guilt and shame find healing from moral injury. And gridiron innovation. Football programs tackle virtual reality.
Went high.
Those stories and more on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, August 17th, 2015. Good evening from Washington. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Brian Patrick with your news now. A shakeup among top Republicans as candidates make their case in Iowa. With more on new poll numbers, Wyatt Goolsbee reports from the White House tonight. Wyatt?
Brian, the latest numbers on the GOP race show a rise, or at least a strong growth in support for the anti-establishment candidates. Outsiders like Carly Fiorina or Ben Carson and others like Scott Walker and Jeb Bush are falling. But as some candidates rise and others fall, there's one frontrunner who's remained fairly steady in his numbers, and that's Donald Trump.
Taking a break from the campaign trail today, Donald Trump reports for jury duty in New York City.
His hair, by the way, does not look bad at all.
Despite a slight dip, Trump remains the frontrunner in a Fox News poll with 25% support. On the rise, neurosurgeon Ben Carson with 12% and Texas Senator Ted Cruz with 10%. Jason Russell with the Washington Examiner says both Carson and Carly Fiorina got a boost after the recent debate.
Ben Carson talked a lot about how he's a brain surgeon and he was the only candidate to have separated twins before. But in terms of introducing their background and what they stand for and what they believe for, that was generally new for these voters.
Mike Huckabee took a strong pro-life stance on Sunday talk shows. Jeb Bush has lost ground since the debate. Trump, meanwhile, is now offering a hardline immigration plan. His new proposal calls for an end to birthright citizenship, stricter limits on legal immigration, and pushes for Mexico to pay for a wall on the border.
I will fight as hard as I can.
All the GOP contenders are blasting Democrat Hillary Clinton over her private email server used while she was Secretary of State. She is still the clear frontrunner, but Senator Bernie Sanders of Vermont is gaining ground. The vice president is also considering jumping into the race. Advisors tell Joe Biden he needs to make that decision before October 1st.
If Joe Biden decides to run, it's not clear who the Obama administration will support. In the past, the administration has supported the Clinton campaign. And in fact, this past weekend, President Obama spent some time during his vacation in Martha's Vineyard to play golf with former President Bill Clinton. Brian?
Wyatt Goolsbee at the White House. Thank you, Wyatt. Some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. A large explosion rocks a popular tourist destination in Bangkok, Thailand today. At least 18 people are dead and more than 100 injured after that evening rush hour blast near a popular Hindu shrine. The intersection has been the center of many political demonstrations in recent years. Bomb squad members say a second explosive device found nearby needed to be defused. Thousands of Chinese troops search for chemicals at the site of last week's deadly warehouse explosions in Tianjin. Beijing today ordered a nationwide check for workplace safety, trying to correct problems. 114 people are confirmed dead and 70 are still missing. Air and ground searches for a missing plane in Indonesia are suspended by darkness. That plane carrying 54 people crashed in a mountainous region Sunday during bad weather. Rescue teams spotted debris from the plane today. Authorities say 4 postal workers carrying nearly $500,000 in government cash for poor families were on board. The search for the plane resumes as daylight and weather permits. At least 40 migrants died this weekend on an overcrowded boat in the Mediterranean Sea. They were apparently killed by fuel fumes. The Italian Navy saved 320 others on that boat. The migrants are fleeing war and persecution in the Middle East, Africa, and Asia. Tens of thousands braved that journey across the Mediterranean, hoping for asylum in Europe. Bay Area commuters face Monday morning delays after a short, sharp earthquake rattles the San Francisco area. The U.S. Geological Survey says the 4.0 magnitude quake was centered near Berkeley. It was felt in downtown San Francisco. Gentle rolls followed that initial sharp jolt. Bay Area Rapid Transit, or BART, held trains to check the tracks on the public transit system this morning. Wildfires burn out of control in 8 western states. Soaring temperatures are not helping. Jason Calvi reports.
Out of control flames spreading, already burning over 1 million acres across 8 states. A growing wildfire crisis fueled by erratic winds, lightning, and soaring temperatures.
We are not out of the woods yet.
Over 100 large wildfires are burning uncontained.
It's just awful. This is the worst in all my life.
Officials giving it the nation's highest fire alert level.
It's really upsetting. You don't want to see anybody lose their homes.
Resources are stretched thin as thousands of firefighters are working overtime, some battling conditions intensified by California's historic drought.
Every resource that you can think of is on short demand in this country right now.
Over 1,000 residents warned to flee the infernos.
It's pretty unimaginable. There's no preparing for this.
Some barely escaping the flames.
This whole ridge was on fire. That whole hillside there, this whole hillside was on fire last night. I was literally outrunning flames at 60 miles an hour.
Hundreds of homes and buildings from California to Washington state left smoldering, reduced to ashes.
It was pretty scary. I've never seen a firestorm like this travel this fast.
About 9,000 homes were without power as wildfires outside Chelan, Washington burned down utility poles.
Everything that can be done now is being done out there, and our first priority is protecting people and homes.
Jason Calvi, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Jason. Campaigning this weekend, Hillary Clinton can't escape questions about her private email server.
I used a single account for convenience. Obviously, these years later, it doesn't look so convenient. And the facts are I did not send nor did I receive material marked classified.
Clinton recently turned her server over to the FBI, which is investigating the security of her email setup. Her publicly released emails show Clinton did receive messages that were later marked classified. Clinton's use of her own server during her time as Secretary of State continues to dog her presidential campaign. Hans von Spakovsky is a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation. So the FBI finally has that email server, but it's been months since it was requested. Hasn't there been plenty of time to compromise that?
Well, yes, particularly because, remember, she said that they had deleted upwards of 30,000 emails from that server. That means they had to have some professional come in and work on that, and we don't know how much he may have compromised that email server.
Is there any chance of recovering any of those deleted emails?
That depends on how professional the job was done. But here's one thing we do know about this, and that is if any lower-level employee in the federal government, if the government had found out that they had been running their communications through a home server, I could guarantee you the Justice Department would have been there the next day in court getting a court order to seize that server. Instead, it's taken, 6 months.
What have we learned from the emails that have been released?
Well, we've learned that in just a small sampling of the emails that the IG, Inspector General, looked at, they found material that was classified as top secret, including, by the way, national reconnaissance information. That's some of the most confidential information.
So wasn't there a risk of that system being hacked and that information being leaked?
Oh, absolutely. And in fact, you don't have to look very far to see prior government officials who were prosecuted, such as General Petraeus, for keeping classified material on their unsecured home computers. It was really a very foolish thing to do.
So now that the server has been turned over to the FBI, what action do you think the FBI should take?
The FBI has to do what's called a forensic audit of that computer server, because they don't want to just look at the emails and what was in them, classified, confidential material. They also need to check it to see whether they can tell whether hackers, particularly foreign intelligence agencies, got into the system and therefore got access to very high-level and sensitive government information.
How difficult will that be to find out, or is that something that should come when they analyze the server?
Well, look, former Attorney General Michael Mukasey recently talked about this and said, the team that the FBI has to look at this is unexcelled by anybody else. So the best people we have are going to be looking at it. How much they'll be able to find out, that we don't know.
So what is the reality of what is likely to happen compared to what should happen?
Look, this Justice Department has been totally politicized by the administration. That certainly happened under Eric Holder. It has continued that way under the current Attorney General, Loretta Lynch. And whether or not we'll get a real investigation depends purely on politics and whether this White House wants there to be one.
The plot thickens.
It does.
Hans von Spakovsky from the Heritage Foundation, thanks for being with us.
Thanks for having me.
Well, defying warnings given to other states, Arkansas ends its Medicaid payments to Planned Parenthood. Governor Asa Hutchinson is ordering contracts with Planned Parenthood to be terminated within 30 days. This after undercover videos revealed Planned Parenthood harvests and possibly sells organs and tissue from aborted babies. Pope Francis speaks twice this weekend to a public audience in St. Peter's Square.
Il mio pensiero va in questo momento alla popolazione della città di Tianjin.
The Pope saying his thoughts go out in this moment to the Chinese people after last week's deadly warehouse explosion. He gave an extra Angelus address for Saturday's Solemnity of the Assumption. Then on Sunday, he focused on the Eucharist at his audience. He said, sometimes people complain, what is Mass for? I pray better alone. But the Holy Father reminds us the Eucharist is not a private prayer. He says it is Jesus who gives himself entirely to us. Coming up, celebrations in London and Honolulu mark 70 years since World War II finally came to an end. And help for veterans suffering from moral injuries after witnessing horrific violence. From every land should arise one voice, no to war and violence, and yes to dialogue and peace. Pope Francis recently reflecting on the horrors of the Second World War, which ended 70 years ago. Thanks for joining us this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Today is August 17th. And Britain marks the 70th anniversary of the Japanese surrender that ended World War II. Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall sing along at a weekend ceremony. They also attended a memorial parade in London. Earlier, Queen Elizabeth led a church service for fallen military members. Many British military veterans participated in the ceremonies. A spectacular 20-minute fireworks show marks the historic anniversary in Pearl Harbor. Part of the naval base open to the public for the weekend celebration. The U.S. was drawn into that war when Japanese planes bombed Pearl Harbor, December 1941. Honolulu's mayor was joined by the mayor of Nagoya, Japan, in celebrating 70 years of peace and friendship. Veterans of more recent wars received treatment for their wounded souls, a psychological wound known as moral injury. A remote cemetery in the Oklahoma Plains is where veteran Marshall Powell goes to remember family members who taught him right from wrong.
I'm sorry, I know you taught me this, I know you taught me that, but while I was over there, I couldn't do it that way.
Powell's moral code was tested while serving as a medic in Iraq. He says there were several things he saw and did during the war that made him feel shame and guilt, including witnessing too many civilian deaths. But one incident is burned into his mind and won't go away. A young Iraqi girl was brought into his Army field hospital with severe injuries after a bombing. There was nothing Powell could do to save her, but he blames himself for the girl's death.
Why did they do this to this little girl? She didn't do anything to nobody. And my heart just sank.
He brought home memories of that little girl and went into a downward spiral, resulting in severe depression and heavy drinking.
I was very guilty, and I was ashamed.
But then Powell got help here at a group counseling program called Oasis at a naval base in San Diego. He learned his condition had a name, moral injury, and that he wasn't the only veteran suffering from it. Unlike post-traumatic stress disorder, which is based on fear, moral injury is rooted in feelings of shame, guilt, and failure.
We talk about what are you needing from the group, what are you not needing from the group, which is usually, I don't want you to tell me it was okay, because they know that it wasn't okay.
To the parents of the little girl.
As part of his counseling, Powell was given an exercise to write a letter about his moral injury. He chose to write to the parents of the Iraqi girl.
I know you had to be proud of her because she was so cute and innocent, looking up as a lamb. As I was taking care of her, I noticed how much pain she was in and it hurt me to no end. The only thing I could do was administer painkillers, injections, to ease her pain before she went to a special place. We all will be soon.
To try to help military personnel deal with moral injury before it happens, this lab at the University of Southern California created a virtual reality game. It puts soldiers through extreme situations they may have to deal with on the battlefield, like the death of a child.
Damn, sorry, little man.
To train people for war, we use the best technology. To run the war, well, maybe we need to use the best technology to help people afterwards or to prepare them better psychologically.
Moral injury was coined by retired clinical psychiatrist Jonathan Shea, who recognized the problem in the Vietnam veterans he was treating.
A state in which people are certain that all possibility of virtue has deserted their lives, and in that state, people kill themselves quite readily.
Shea and others believe moral injury is one of the factors behind the high military suicide rate. Powell said he considered taking his own life, but thanks to therapy and support from his family, he is able to cope.
I still have you in my heart and know what you taught me, and I haven't lost it. You know, I'm still who you wanted me to be.
Up next, candidates butt heads over the best way to secure America's southern border. And quarterbacks fine-tune their skills on a virtual practice field. Faith is seeing God's providence when he says yes and seeing his love when he says no. From EWTN foundress Mother Angelica, celebrating 71 years of religious life on Saturday's Feast of the Assumption. Congratulations, Mother. Thanks for joining us on this Monday evening. I'm Brian Patrick. Republican candidates clash today over securing our border. New Jersey Governor Chris Christie takes a jab at Donald Trump's immigration plan. He says there's no way Mexico will pay for a wall along its border with the U.S.
And this is not a negotiation of a real estate deal, okay? This is international diplomacy, and it's different,
Christie suggests more intelligence agents should work more closely with the Border Patrol. He also says the U.S. should use drones and electronics to watch troublesome sections along the border. Teresa Brown is Director of Immigration Policy at the Bipartisan Policy Center. So, Teresa, how much campaign focus is on this issue of immigration at this point, and will we see it continue during the campaign?
Well, I think different candidates either include or don't in their stump speeches, but certainly at this point, every time they do a press interview, somebody is asking them about it. Donald Trump has made a lot of news about immigration in his campaign so far, but actually Mrs. Clinton, when she first announced her campaign, immediately started talking about immigration as well. So both the Democrats and the Republicans have immigration on their mind, and it's going to continue.
Now, you have researched immigration reform extensively.
Yes.
What works? What doesn't work?
Well, when it comes to enforcement, that's one of the key issues. We don't necessarily know what works because we don't really have good measures to say so. We certainly have invested a lot in border security and immigration enforcement in the last 10 years. Millions of dollars at the border, lots of infrastructure, tripling the number of Border Patrol, advanced technology, sensors, drones, other things like that. But what we haven't done is said how well has that done for us. We did a report at Bipartisan Policy Center early this year that talked about the need for better metrics. So what you have is you have people who say the border is wide open, it's not secure in spite of all that investment, and other people who say it's more secure than ever. We need to find out the truth, and we need the government to tell us the truth about the numbers.
Well, I'm reminded of President Reagan in Berlin saying, tear down this wall. And now you have Donald Trump saying, put up a wall.
Yeah.
Is that practical to wall the border between the U.S. and Mexico?
Well, I would say in some senses, practicality is not the point. The point is that people want to see a better effort at enforcement at the U.S.-Mexico border. We do have walls and fencing at various parts of the border, and the government has chosen where it seems most effective to put walls, where it's more effective to use other types of preventive measures. And every part of the border is different. Parts of it are broad stretches of desert with deep, deep canyons. You have the Rio Grande Valley and the Big Bend, which is, you know, a river with cliffs on one side. And then you have parts of it which are just literally cities right next door to each other with a fence in between. So I would say there's no single answer that's going to be the right answer all across the border.
So you have experience with the Border Patrol, don't you?
I worked at Department of Homeland Security for 6.5 years, both at U.S. Customs and Border Protection with the Border Patrol and with DHS headquarters, yes.
What are the main misconceptions that we as Americans have about border security?
Well, I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that border security happens right at the border. A lot of what we do that's about border security doesn't happen at the border. It is about, as Governor Christie said, our cooperation with our partners in Canada and Mexico. It is about the work that we do at, for example, our 300 ports of entry at airports in the United States. That's border security also. And when we're talking about immigration, what we do inside the country also has an impact. So border security is not just at the border.
Well, there's certainly a lot of things to discuss, and I know that they will be brought up repeatedly throughout the campaign. And thank you so much for the clarification and sharing your experience with us.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Teresa Brown, Director of Immigration Policy for the Bipartisan Policy Center. Well, don't look for college football unions, players' unions, anytime soon. A ruling allowing college athletes to unionize is dismissed today by the National Labor Relations Board. Northwestern University football players were trying to form the nation's first union of college athletes. Today's ruling, which cannot be appealed, says unionizations could throw off the competitive balance between teams. And as the NFL preseason kicked off this weekend, football programs are tackling virtual reality. Catherine Zeltner reports.
I was my free safety. I see him rolling to the middle of the field.
Sitting in an air-conditioned office, University of Mississippi quarterback Ryan Buchanan is actually running a play with his full offense against a live defense, just like he would during a normal practice.
Reading the safeties. Safety went high.
Ole Miss has started something new, using virtual reality equipment as part of their training.
You don't have a ball in your hand. You don't have guys. You don't have to move around in the pocket, of course, but I'm seeing the same things I am going to see.
Seeing things by wearing a headset connected to either a computer or a smartphone. Entire playbooks can be loaded for quarterbacks, who then get to run plays with the same view they would get on the field.
And anything that we can find to get that extra edge over our opponents, and especially if the kids enjoy it and they feel like they're learning from it, it's got to be a positive for us.
The program was developed by Eon Sports, who along with Ole Miss have UCLA, Kansas, Syracuse, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers among their clients. The company says the mobility of the headset can give players an edge they haven't had before.
Now the athlete can access this content in preparation if he's at home laying in bed, on if he's icing his ankle, if he's on the road trip to the next game. All of these, the mobility and the ease of use is what coaches really have gravitated towards.
Not everything can be simulated, of course. The weather is always perfect in the headset, and the receivers always run a perfect route.
It's nice. I want to say video game, but it is a little bit different. You know what I mean? It's kind of cool.
But virtual reality is a way to avoid risking fatigue and injury.
The higher up you go, the more of an investment's made on the athletes. So if we can reduce the physical wear and tear that they're incurring in the physical process, reduce the need of access to facilities, the need of access to 21 other guys running plays.
Eon Sports isn't the only company vying for clients in the world of virtual reality. A company called Striver also has a growing list of clients, including Auburn, Arkansas, Stanford, the Minnesota Vikings, and the Dallas Cowboys. Catherine Zeltner, EWTN News Nightly.
Thank you, Catherine. They should consider marketing that to Monday morning quarterbacks or fantasy football teams. That'd be a lot of fun. Until tomorrow, we encourage you to like us on Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter. If you'd like to watch again, go to EWTN's YouTube page. For our EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. Good night. God bless you.